I forgot. I thought I was talking. Apparently not. I'm trying. Um, hi. uh, I am recording this so that way I could afterward, in case people later on as a reference, or in case watch something that's replayed. Hopefully, goes well. Hmm. um, I'm terribly sorry if this is like kind of scuff. Only because like I'm not used to streaming. I get a little nervous. Let me see if I can window. If it asks. Okay. Um. Moment.
Rock that gives 3.
Oh well. So. Hello. I don't. But hi. I am Ship, and I am a mixer. If you're here, I am a little nervous. I'm not quite. The. I'm gonna do my best. Um. Where it's supposed. um. So yeah, this stream is particularly aimed at people who are just starting to mix covers. Specifically, I myself um I've been doing it for, and while I'm not like an authority on it, like I'm self-taught. So please feel free to take anything I say. Look at other channels, look at other resources about this is just observations that I've made as I've learned. Share them. It can be hard learning how to mix especially if it's not um you're not used to working with audio. I myself had far prior than actually mixing. I wanted to better and well try this. And here I am, and now I mix. hi, you have that little part of me think. um, so the tips that I have, I written down myself. They're not completely written. The slideshow to write all of. I ended up having it. I had to, and I didn't end up everything that I. But I do have my notes that organization, and this will be accessible after the stream. So that hopefully, um, coupled with a more finished slideshow that I post later and link, will help you. So I'm gonna start with, well, why do we mix? Specifically, this stream will focus on timing, EQ, expression, and I will showcase myself mixing a little bit with a raw vocal that I just simple, a main melody, and I want to showcase what I can achieve with a good understanding of time. So I won't be delving into tuning reverb so much. I will explain them briefly, but I'm not going to add so much of them, so much emphasis on thing, and I'll briefly explain it. I won't go into detail that I've made. Is that better? Might be because I am a little quiet and I'm talking to myself in my room essentially, so it makes me a little nervous. Okay. Oh, another thing I'm not focusing on tuning reverbs and delays, particularly tuning because that one does require some pay for or the most common plugins that you use for, and my assumptions going into the stream would be that you don't have that you're a brand new mixer and you're entering without most of the stuff that you would end up using. Um, so my assumption is that you're probably not willing to pay for a plugin that you don't know if you're going to utilize yet, especially if you're unsure about mixing. So I'm not going to be reverbs and delays. I'll get into why I'm not focused a little bit later because it's more of a subjective area. And I have a feeling that if you're here, you're struggling with some of the more what you feel to be objective areas of mixing. Like you're worried about whether you're doing it right or wrong. And those areas typically tend to be timing, tuning, EQ when I help other friends and other new mixers. So I'm gonna focus mainly on three that I know for sure have either either basic plugins with your DAW or that have very free, like very high quality, free, accessible plugins that you can um and I will recommend. There are some good ones. I do um for timing you don't so much need plugins. You tend to be basic setting and I think most DAWs have a function for stretching out how accurate they can be don't have an answer for. You would have to look up that part. Um, but if you are curious about looking into it more, I would suggest looking up into YouTube whatever the name of your program is or your DAW, and then type in afterwards vocal stretching, and you should be able to tutorials based off of that, based off of your own, and you can use your own judgment about how much to use. Mm. Particularly, I want to focus on why, and I put here that the obvious answer is, but there's a lot of things you have to think as to why and how you want to make it. The how is important. You have to, what changes you want to make that good sound. What, in your opinion, sounds good? And a lot of that is determined by, I'd say, intuition. And intuition is cultivated. Basically, the more you practice and the more you get used, what happens if you turn up this knob, turn it down, adjust this setting, that setting. After doing that multiple times, you start developing an understanding of what the knob will do and whether you want that sound or not. Obviously, if you just slap your voice onto music, it doesn't sound very pleasing as it is. So when we mix, what we're trying to achieve kind of a balance of the frequency that already exists mental and the frequency trying to add with your own vocals. I put this here to come here and what I'm trying to explain because sometimes for me it requires some visual and some technical understanding. If you know anything from basic science, that a lot of what we as sound is like waves, like sine waves. Could what happens is when it hits our ears, it's hitting certain hairs in our ears. We interpret that movement as sound. But everyone's voice is made up of like thousands and thousands of different waves. Into your ear. Another one could be that into your ear. And when we all those waves end up hitting our ear, interpret it as one big wave, and we that as our voices. Everyone has different amounts of different frequencies hitting your ears at times. It's a sciencey experience, but it's the best could come up. What happens when we're listening to music is frequencies, pitches, and all that stuff. So I listed out 6 separate that we tend to think of as contributing good mix. And I think that these are the core aspects of as I listed here. But they are essentially the basic parts that you need to make something that's enjoyable. anything else that you might add to enhance it if you already understand how to use it. Tend to give mixers the most trouble. It's hard. Not gonna lie. A little confusing. But it's impossible. I've listed tuning, tune compression, and I paired them up in box. That's because I see them as going from a range of more objective qualities of mixing to more subjective. We tend to think of timing and tuning as more objective or like right or wrong when you're listening to it, and that's because you're in error in timing or tuning is very jarring. It kind of breaks immersion. You can notice more problems with that than you can with other aspects. With EQ and compression, because those aspects span over the whole song, your ears kind of get used as you're listening, and you start to struggle with hearing any differences in those. Oh no, I'm sorry. You're super low. Let me see. Thank you for telling me. There, is that better? Can you hear me better? I don't know if you're still here. I'm a little late to seeing that message. I'm sorry. Okay, cool. Also, hi. I'm not sure. Did you miss any of what I had said, or were you did I cut off at a whole lot to the point where you were unable to understand what I was saying? Okay. Yay. Okay. I did lose my train of thought. Okay. So, a lot of the gray area, I kind of put EQ and compression under this kind of in between gray area between timing, tuning, reverb, and delay. And that's because, well, yes, there are more pleasurable ways that we hear it. Like, there are more pleasurable ways to mix a certain track, and we hear EQ and compression, and there's certain ratios to get a desired effect. It still requires a whole lot of discernment. Like, we still have to think about how we like hearing it sound. For example, a lot of times when I'm mixing, I end up putting a lot of highs because I really like that bright feeling, but some mixers may prefer a warmer tone and may try to lower how much they put on the high ends, so or they may like a bassier feel, um, or another person's vocal or someone's vocals may vary from person to person so much that you may want to focus on taking out certain frequencies or adding certain frequencies. It's more of a game of balance than anything else. Um, Let me see. I have my notes here. I did write something that I had wanted to say specifically. Um, mm-hmm. Oh, I found it. Okay. So, here's the thing. Don't feel bad if you struggle with EQ. It is very, very, very tricky. But that's kind of intentional. You're not making big adjustments to the EQ. It's not going to change anything like the pitch of your notes. It's just going to change how your voice feels to the ears, if that makes sense. So my explanation of the whole ear thing. Let me pull up a picture of... I had ended up doing this earlier. Oh no, it got pasted over that. My bad. These are some pictures of some I have these programs. I have this one from Audacity in the lower corner. And these are plugins from Reaper. And these are plugins from FL Studio. These two are parametric EQs. And the difference between that and a regular EQ is that you can see the waves being formed as you're mixing. It's really good I encourage, at least, new mixers to use parametric EQ because you can visually see the waves. And if you haven't developed an ear for what certain frequencies hold certain sounds, then it's better to use this in order to see where you're getting lots of waves from. And I'll show myself mixing with an EQ later. But essentially each range of sound will have different feelings on the ears, and your goal is to make either certain frequency ranges enhanced or certain frequency ranges lowered based off of how it makes your ears feel. Or at least that's how I interpret it. So, EQ ranges. I'm just looking it up on here, but you might want to find a certain one that you might want to look into videos that explain it more or less. Essentially, though, the 20s to 100 range. I don't know if you could see my cursor. Can you? You might not be able to. No, you can't. Okay. Let me make this bigger. Okay. So right where it says the 20s to 100 range, that red area that says lows, oftentimes that area is responsible for making your vocals feel a bit more heavy, but it's not too prominent in typically higher vocals. But it may impede like listening and sounding clear. Low mids is kind of like a boxy sound. It sounds like your voice is muffled, or like basically like your voice is trapped in a container and it's just not clear. Mid-range is more about sounding present, sounding like you're in the room right next to someone, being very loud. High mids is more about brightness, and then the highs is sounding very airy, sounding sorry, I thought of the way my sister would say, sounding almost like you're on clouds, or as my sister would say, sounding so ooh-woo. She's tiny, so I have to mock her a little bit. But essentially, you're sounding like you're very, very soft, very, very airy, light. And you may not notice it immediately if a vocal tone is like the complete opposite, but you will notice it in ones that I've described. There's this really helpful, this very helpful cheat sheet that kind of handily explains different ranges, and I tend to reference it if I'm struggling on EQ. Musician EQ. I can't spell. Musician on a mission. This one. I use this a lot when I'm struggling with a mix. So basically, what he has here is different descriptors for a word. So it's different problems or different goals that you would want your voice to sound like. So like on the top it says boomy, muddy, all that. Wherever that bar is above the numbers, that range is responsible for that kind of description of a vocal. So if you would describe a vocal as muddy, you look down and see that that problem is in the 100s to roughly 500 range. And you see that on the left side, it says too much. So if you're feeling like your vocals are sounding a bit too muddy, you might want to turn down something in that range. Or if you want your vocals to sound a certain way, like if you want it to sound full, for example, that you want that description, it's green and it's in the 200 and 1000 range. So if it's not sounding full, let's say it sounds a little bit let's say it sounds hollow, then you know you need to turn it up. If it sounds way too boxy or way too nasally, then you know you want to turn something down. I personally like using this sheet. It helped me a lot when I was first starting, definitely. I almost like relied on it. And then for compression is also another subtle one. It is definitely also one that new mixers struggle with, but I'd argue that people actually underuse it, or new mixers underuse it, for fear that it is so powerful. Essentially, what you're doing with compression is you're turning down the loud volumes. And you can turn up the quieter volumes, but mostly what you're doing is you're turning it down. Sorry. And I'll explain that. Actually, I can open up Reaper and start showing you what some of this stuff is as I'm like go about it. So let me pull up my Reaper. I already have it set. I have Amin Melody vocals that I recorded it a few days ago. And it's an English cover for Shiawase, the Honeyrick song, because I'm a Honeyrick stan. I'll play it briefly so that way you guys can hear what it sounds like without any mixing so far. I did turn down the volume a little bit, but the volume of the instrumental a little bit. So you will be able to hear what my vocals sound like, because if it was turned up all the way, because it's unmixed, it might get covered by sound and you might not understand what I'm saying at all. Okay.
Although you may be crying, still your face brings so much light. A treasure born from feelings that were so right. And like a holy flower shining down from up above. The dreams we have will never die as long as there is love.
So as you can hear so far, it's definitely not perfect, but I'm just going to be using timing, EQ, and compression on this for now for the stream, and later I'll upload with I'll probably add reverb.
I acted tough and pushed away whatever would see me, and threw away the love you gave. I didn't think what you consider normal suddenly could disappear, and that is when you miss the precious things you should hold dear. I cannot put these feelings into words, so I hold all that I love, giving more out in return. Over time, I started to smile more, and it's all because of you. It's so different from before.
I'm going to end it there for now. But as you could hear so far, there's definitely pockets that sound way more legible, and there's pockets that sound so quiet that you can't even understand what I'm saying. And that's because it hasn't been compressed yet, and my voice is, I'd say, on the more dynamic range for vocalists. No matter what, the voice, any person's voice would be considered the most dynamic instrument in a mix. We just have a really broad range of how quiet we can be and how loud we can be. And compression helps to deal with that. When you compress, what you're doing is you're making your voice more even. Like more uniform in volume. But because it's more uniform in volume, our ears interpret that to be louder. So that's why some people can get a little bit scared by it. They interpret that compression and uniformity to be, oh no, this is way too loud. Or they interpret like very quiet pockets and very loud pockets to be overcompression, which is the opposite. And I don't blame them. I definitely was terrified of overcompressing when I first started. Since then, I've definitely changed how I've mixed, though. So let me go ahead and start in with one of the parts in the loud section, or the louder section that we had. I'll do with this phrase. As you can see, oh, you're not going to be able to see my mouse. No. I wonder if I can change it right now so that way you would be able to. Because I think it's kind of important for me to be able to gesture. Okay, you should be able to see my mouse now. I really hope so. This part is important to me, that you see what parts I'm gesturing at and what changes I'm making. So as you can see, this part has a lot of quieter bits and like one or two lines that very much jet out, like this one right here. Yay, I'm glad you could see it. Okay. I'm going to quickly just time this section, and I'll show you some tricks that I use when I'm timing. This one's a little bit harder. Every mixer has a different approach to timing, and you may find that you have some other preferences, but these are the tips that I prefer and the flow that I prefer. Now, basically what you need when you're timing, I also I like to take out my breaths. I don't know why the breath bothers me. But when you're timing, for new mixers, I often recommend that you time alongside a reference with the on vocals. Sometimes they can end up showing you like where the original lines were sung based off of how big the bulge is. And it can give you a hint as if you're not completely sure where to make your cuts and where to nudge your lines and all that stuff. But when you're timing, you're mainly going to end up using the cutting tool, and you're going to end up shifting lines manually to different parts of the song. Or you're going to be using the stretching tool. And I mentioned this earlier, but each program has their stretching tool, but each one's is a little bit different. I use Reaper because I found that I've preferred their stretching tool. But I know like FL Studio has a stretching mode, and I believe Audacity has a stretching mode, but it works differently. I know the last time I used Audacity, their stretching tool changes the pitch as well as the time. So it lengthens your note, but then it changes what pitch your note is at. And I'm not sure if it still works that way. I could be entirely wrong. But my preference is Reaper's, because there are settings that you can do in order to make it so that way you don't have any loss of quality when you do, or you have very minimal loss of quality when you do stretch your vocals. I really highly recommend at least giving the free trial a trial run. It is my preference. I believe the personal license is still $60, which if you feel like you like it and you want to continue mixing, that's really great. A lot of other DAWs would cost in the hundreds, and Reaper is a really good tool. But if not, Audacity, I'm sure there are workarounds. For the sake of this, I'm not going to be stretching my vocals so much. I'm going to try and focus on mainly cuts and nudges. So, but in the event that I do want to stretch, I'm setting you go to take pitch shift time stretch mode, and you go to elastic soloist, and it'll automatically make this term be monophonic. And you go to tonal optimized. And what these settings do is it makes it so that way your vocal can be stretched more so than the other modes, and it's meant to keep the quality of the smoothness of a vocal. Oh, I forgot I turned that on. My bad. I also recorded some lines of harmony in the event that I wanted to show that. It's more for this example. I didn't record the whole song because I wasn't gonna do harmonies along the whole song. I low-key was being a little lazy. But essentially what I would do is first, you want to make sure that your BPM down here in the lower corner is correct for the song. There is a website that I use personally, TuneBat. And it may not always be super accurate, but it is the most accurate that I've noticed of the programs. I personally struggle with finding keys and BPM, so what you do is you upload your file into this box, and then you end up it'll take a moment to upload, but it will tell you the BPM that the song is at, and it'll tell you, or the closest estimate to what it's at. It's usually pretty good. And then what key it assumes you're in. Depending if there's a key shift, you might want to export to like a cut version where that key shift exists, and you might want to put that in separate. I had already put mine through that, found my BPM. Usually I would put what key it's in up here so that way I remember. And you could choose edit region, name it whatever you want. But I didn't this time because I don't plan on tuning. I'm sorry, my cough is getting really bad. A little bit of water. So what I start with giving it another listen. You're going to find that you're going to listen to your own voice a lot. Like a lot. And the other day I had a friend tell me, do you ever get used to like hearing your own voice and does it get better? And I'm like, I want to say yes. But no, you don't completely get used to hearing your own voice all the time. I admittedly get kind of sick of listening to my own voice when I'm mixing myself, and I'll get frustrated. Later I'll show you one of a mix that I recently completed. It's my own cover. I'm low-key a little proud of it, so it might be a little bit of vanity, but I'm also showing you so that way you can see the amount of plugins I end up using on a singular mix, because it is a lot to make to try and make a very I guess the word would be produced cover. But it's more so that way you don't feel uncomfortable with the idea of using a lot of plugins. Another friend had asked me about if it was okay for them to use more than 2 compressors, and I'm like, oh honey, I use so many. Throughout my mix, you will see you become numb to it. Throughout my mix, you will see so many EQs, so many compressors, all doing different things. And it's fine as long as you know what your intention is in using that plugin at that time. Another concern I always see is order. Is order important? Like the order of your plugins. To an extent, yes and no. It really depends. There will be different changes in sound. So for this, let me put Reaper's EQ and Reaper's compression. And these are the stock plugins that I'm using for this vocal right now. I'm gonna play it and I'm gonna adjust to what I think would be a decent like ratio of attack, release, threshold, and ratio. Maybe knee size too, but I'll explain what each of those mean after I've done this. So let me play. Okay, so as you just saw, I tried to mimic what I would do if I were doing a mix by myself, in my own space on my own. And you saw me go for moving the threshold first, changing the ratio, and then changing the attack and the release. what the threshold does is it sets a certain, you're setting a level of at what noise level do I want this compression to start working? When do I want it to start pushing down those louder volumes? So when my vocals are really quiet, like let's say probably this area would be probably more quiet, it's not gonna compress down on these vocals because they're already quiet and they're probably underneath the -26 range. But anything above it, if my compression notices that it's starting to get to that level, it'll start pushing it down. Ratio is telling the compressor how much do I want this thing to be squashed. How much do I want it to go down? And then attack is saying when do I want this to go down, and release is when do I want it to stop going down. As you can see, I have a somewhat mid threshold. For a vocal, I have a strong ratio. My attack, my release. And that was just on a first impression what I think might work, but I don't feel confident in this. And that's fine because you could adjust it as you go. I definitely would end up changing this as I go throughout the mix. So I would probably, thinking about it now, I would change the knee size. The knee size basically gives you a bit of wiggle room. It tells your compressor, hey, this vocal is getting close to this level that I've set, but it's not there yet. You might want to start compressing so it's less jarring when you do the hard compression. I do know a good site for this one to teach you a little bit more about compression. Compression guide. Yeah. This site, Patches Zone, it shows you visually what's happening when you use compression, and I'd say it's very good. I'll link it in the YouTube video. It can definitely explain this far better than me. Yeah. Okay. But my EQ, I haven't done anything to yet, right? Right now, my EQ will be, whatever changes I make to my EQ will affect the vocal before it goes through compression. And if I move it below compression, then my compression will come first and my EQ will affect whatever happened after compression. So the order does affect the sound in that way, but it really depends on you if you like the sound of it going in a certain order. I tend to use it at both times because, well, for a lot of reasons actually. When you use it before, you can use it as a great way to clean up your vocals and make cuts. So this is how this one's affecting your voice as it was recorded. I personally prefer to use dynamic EQs. And this is where I'm going to mention one of the free plugins that I do really recommend using. It's called TDR Nova. The only problem is with EQ, regular EQ, like the parametric one, the bass one, you can see that when I play, you end up having, you end up seeing some of the waveforms. These are the frequencies that are really prominent in my vocals. But if you play it when you're on TDR Nova, you're not going to see anything. That one you're going to have to go based off of your own judgment. There is a workaround though. You could have TDR Nova before a regular EQ. And then any changes that you make when you're using the TDR, you could see if you have them separate. I do recommend playing around with your vocal. And when I say play around, I mean like record something absolutely garbage. Like the worst take ever. Do not care. Detach yourself from feeling anything for that vocal and make it sound awful with how loud and how quiet you're gonna put that EQ parameter at. So first let me show you. You can see that little dip in the 1K range because I made a little cut here. I don't have it on loop. Oopsies. So you can see that there's a change here. You can see that it got a little bit higher. I'll make this a little bit bigger so you can see more changes. So you see in this change, this part went down dramatically. But there are loud different changes when you move this around, right? So that's why I do encourage, like, literally just mess around in a similar way like you would with an art program. Just see what the different settings do if you do changes. For now, I'm gonna turn this off. Oh, I pulled this up for a reason. Also, please feel free to, like, tell me, hey, you lost your train of thought. I have the mind of a squirrel. If I go on a tangent, I might never return. So feel free to rein me in. Your normal... That's harsh. You have a good voice. Anyway. So the reason I recommend TDR Nova is, yes, you can't see directly on here what the waveforms are doing, but it does have one great advantage. You can do dynamic EQ. So what dynamic EQ is, it's almost like a compression for a specific EQ band or a specific EQ bump. So if I have that and I set the threshold, I can lower that threshold and return this to the normal band that it was at. Return it to 0 gain. That means I'm leaving the volume on that specific frequency range at normal. But if that range ever gets to be past this, like, its base of 0 gain, like if it ever gets past, like, the fact that I didn't change it and gets way too loud, then this band right here will duck it down and make it quiet, make that specific range quieter on its own. As you can see, like, at certain points, you'll see this little band duck down a little bit. So my voice is getting too loud in that range. It's deciding, oh, okay, we need to make this go quieter. Blush. Feel good. Feel good about your voice. Deal with it. I believe in aggressive affection. Anyway. That's why I recommend TDR Nova Dynamic EQ. Okay, what was the other thing I had wanted to mention? There was something I wanted to mention, but my train of thought got way off course. Okay. Oh, I feel sorry for whoever watches this later on. You're just gonna see like absolute confusion at some points. I'm trying my best, but I'm not used to streaming, so I apologize. Typically I don't use pre-compression. It kind of it does what it says. It'll have this part ducked down a little bit before the actual song like enters. I assume that it's probably more useful in other like when you're mixing the actual instrumentals themselves, the stems. It probably serves some purpose there, but typically with vocals I don't end up using it. I don't see other people using it. It's not, you don't have to pay too much focus on that one. Okay, I will try more serious. If you want to toggle on and off the effects that you have on a vocal just to see if you're actually like making changes that you want from and comparing it to like how it sounds before you've done anything to it, that could be really helpful just for the context and to see like, were these changes that I actually wanted to make, or are my ears getting tired and I'm just making changes? I am enjoying myself. I'm getting to talk to myself at myself very loudly. I'm vibing. I am talking to you, or I guess more accurately at you. Okay. So I'm gonna try and start like actually trying to mix it a little bit more with timing and stuff like that. It's weird when you think about it. Yeah, but I already talked to myself a little more than usual. This time I actually like have like some veneer of excuse. I can justify it to myself, be like, I'm talking to people in a stream rather than the daily me talking to myself just because I talk to myself. I'm not afraid of admitting that at all. Yeah, I'm not afraid of admitting it. It's true, it's valid. Other people do it. They just are cowards and don't want to say it. I probably should be cowardly like them, but guess what? I don't think before I speak. That's fun. Okay, so if I were approaching this mix, like to actually for real start it, what I would end up doing is sometimes I will have the original version. I have both the cover version that I based this off of, because these lyrics were based off of Jeffers' cover, English cover of it. I used his lyrics because I wanted to sing in English because I'm lazy. And it's easier to learn that fast for me. So what I would usually do is I would turn down whatever on vocal reference I have, or the original version of whatever song I'm singing. I would turn it way down and play it alongside my own vocal to see what changes I need to make and all that stuff. As you see, this one's not exactly lined up with the original, the instrumental. The instrumental was downloaded from Honeyworks official page, and they do that so that way people can cover it without concern. But I don't think I lined it up very well. Oh well, later me problem. But yeah.
I acted tough and pushed away whatever would see me. I threw away the love I did.
So as you can see, there's definitely changes. Obviously, I sing it different. Obviously, I sing in a completely different language. Who would have thunk? But what you would end up doing is nudging and making changes and comparing, toggling things, making sure that you ended up at least somewhat being relatively on the same time. Timing is all about rhythm and matching up to the rhythm of the already established music that you have. So in this case, I don't think I want to make many changes there. Maybe this one I would nudge it to be a little bit closer. So what I did was I pressed the S button, made a little cut, and I'll literally just move it a little bit to the side. Listen again to see if I like that cut. I like it, move on. Typically, when you're making cuts, you want to make them in the areas that seem most neutral. I like to think of it, but you want to make it in areas where the waveform is almost like non-existent, not there. Except for here, because right here, this word is the word weak. Yes, there's a little cutoff here, and there's this, it's right before a plosive, my case consonant, my sound, but I wouldn't want to make my cut there because then it'll change when that letter sound comes in. I'd rather have that change be afterwards. And I'd like to have it between where I take my breath and my consonant sounds. I like to take, when I do cuts like before other phrases, I will often do my cut right before a breath because it feels more natural to have the breath be in its original place compared to when I started the line. Otherwise, it sounds a little bit weird and a little bit choppy when you go into your next line. Also, I'm zooming in my screen by pressing Control on my keyboard and using my mouse roller to make it larger by going up, smaller by going down. Right here, I see that their next phrase was somewhere around here. I moved my line a little bit, nudged to that area. I kept the breath normal before it went into the next line. And then I play to see if I like that change. And then I like that, but I would like to make this a little bit more to the side. I'd take another cut, move it to the side. Listen. You can do that same thing with the instrumental, but having it with the original vocal makes it a little bit easier because you can see where they sing it and you can compare where you sing it. Typically, we prefer to have it close to what the original sounded like. If it's a little bit off, it's fine as long as you sing with conviction and confidence. That's the key to having a good performance, is sounding confident. Even if you sing it completely wrong, at least sing it with confidence. You sing it with your chest. One thing I would like to highlight about timing and tuning. with timing, it's a little bit more obvious when something is off than with tuning. Our ears just are more attuned to when it happens, especially if we have a direct comparison. Like, if we're listening to a cover, even if we've never heard the song before, yeah, we might not notice. But if we've heard the song before and we hear someone else sing it, we have a direct comparison of what that song should have sounded like. And our expectations will be that song. So when we change something, like if we sing a note slightly too, if we had a note too long, or if we like cut a sound short that shouldn't have been short, it will be a little bit more noticeable rather than tuning. Our ears just aren't as perceptive with tuning, especially if you haven't been trained with singing and keeping a pitch. So the average ear might not even notice, and that's why you can somewhat get away with not tuning. Now, if you're egregiously off, like by tons of notes, then you might struggle a little bit and find that it's less pleasant to listen to. But if you sing it confidently, you're probably going to be fine. As long as you make it sound intentional. That's the main thing about mixing. You want what your cover is going to be to sound intentional. So you can have runs that are completely different. You can sing completely different notes as long as it's in key and as long as it's like confident. That's why I kind of skip tuning. Also, with tuning, I do believe there is a place for it. Like, I 100% all down for tuning. I think it's amazing. And manual tuning takes so much work, and it actually does take creativity, because you have to think about where you want this cut to be, what sound you want to, what kind of impression you want to give off with this note. So tuning is not bad at all. So don't ever let anyone make you feel bad for tuning. Ever. I will fight them. Anyway. Tangent. But, with tuning, there was something else I had wanted to say. With tuning, you can get away with it more if you don't tune. Ears aren't so attuned to that. Maybe I wrote it down. Oh, right. Okay, so I'm not going over tuning because most of the programs that I would suggest for tuning cost money. And because this is assuming that you're a new mixer and you're not yet ready to like commit to purchasing programs to try and make your mixes sound better, especially if you don't know if you're going to do it long term, it's probably better to just do retakes. So if you hear that a voice, like if you hear that your own vocal is a little off, you just retake it, or ask for retakes if you're mixing someone else and they're willing. If not, leave it. It's not the end of the world. I can't think of any, off the top of my head, I can't think of any good free tuning plugins that would be, I can't think of any good tuning plugins that are free that I would suggest to a new person. I know there are things like Repitch on Reaper, or there's, I believe there's a tuning one on FL Studio too, but those aren't meant to preserve the vocal quality that you have on your main vocals, or the clarity that you want for your main vocals. They're meant to be an effect. They're meant for, to kind of change it, and you can develop the taste and make it sound different. And that has its place in mixing. It's just not what you would typically think of as desirable for a main vocal. So, because I can't think of anything that I would recommend, I don't want to go into tuning. And as long as you have retakes, you're fine. You're good. You're golden. As long as you have retakes. Oh, and as long as you're able to recognize what about it you want to change and know how to go about changing it. Let me see if there was something that I had wanted to do a retake of, actually.
I treasure my baba, the dreams from my baba.
Okay, so like right here, I don't particularly like how I sing this line. I do remember that I didn't like it because I felt like my notes were a little short. I probably would have elongated up and above. I was lazy, didn't do a retake. But I probably would want to do a retake. And as long as your section that you want to do a retake in is short, it's a fairly easy means of just swapping something in. I'll show you an example with one of my already recorded harmonies of how you would go about swapping in a retake. So let's just say, for example, I absolutely hated how I did this phrase, and I want to swap it out with this phrase. I would listen. Right here is a s sound or a v sound. It's a s sound. Okay. When you're doing sounds, like anything with that like hissing sound, one of the things I tend to do, and I don't know if other mixers do it, so take it with a grain of salt, I make a brief cut before the phrase that I want taken out, and I leave a little bit of gap room. These lines are the fade-ins, fades-outs. So what happens is once I delete this section, I'm going to move in the new section. And that cut might be hidden a little bit by the fact that I have a fade in, fade out, and that we did this cut in the middle of a harsh sense consonant. Probably not, though, because this one's way bigger. You want the S sounds to be relatively the same height to make a clean cut that people won't notice that much. But you give it a listen. That cut more obvious because this line was a lot more thick, a lot louder, or more consistent sound and louder than this one right here. So it's not a great flip, but you can do that kind of stuff when you're mixing, depending on what the song is. Or if I wanted to nudge this line a little bit to the side, make the same cut and nudge it and have a very low but still keep the fade in, fade out, make it very, very narrow, and that cut's not as that cut won't be as noticeable. Because it's already a consonant sound. See, you don't want to make any changes in the middle of notes. You can, and there are ways to do it. You could do it with the ways I do it are using stretching tool on here, on Reaper, or if it's like a change in note, but the note never ended. Like, let's say right here, I wanted to change something. I would wait until I use Melodyne, my tuning program, and I would make the timing change in there, only because it'll give it a cleaner transition and it won't mess up too much how it will sound. Because Let me do a cut here. What I would do if I were stretching this, like, let's say I decided that the most optimal thing to do is to just stretch it in Reaper. I would go way down, way to the middle, and look for a neutral area. A area where all the dots are lined up on the middle line. And then I would make a little marker there. You can make one by going right-clicking, going to stretch markers, add stretch marker at the cursor, or you could just press Shift W if you're on Reaper, if you're on with the keyboard, and you make another marker. There are two kinds of stretches. Let me make another marker so that way I can show you. Okay, there's two ways to stretch this. When your mouse cursor ends up having the dot with two arrows on the sides of it, that means your stretch marker will move. When you move the stretch marker, these will move an equal amount compared to how much change you want to give it. So if I want this line to be longer, I'll move it, but then this one will get, the whole line will be a little bit shorter compared to the other way of, oh my god, I think my computer's lagging a little bit. Compared to the other way, where you have the dot and the arrows facing up and down. That one will make this one almost like an anchor point. And your whole note will be shifted. But as you can see, as it gets a little bit shifted more and more, the note's wavelength gets longer and more squashed. Or it gets more compressed if I shorten it. And that'll have an effect on your sound and all that kind of stuff. You don't want to stretch it out too much because you will definitely lose quality of vocal. You won't be able to understand. But when you're mixing it and you hear that change, you'll be like, I don't like how this sounds. So you can make the judgment call of taking a retake instead. Oh, it's 2:15 already. Sorry about that. Okay, I think I'm gonna go on until 3. And then once I get closer to 3, I might end up cutting the stream. I'm not sure how hopeful it's been so far, but like, maybe I organize my thoughts better and do a different stream another time. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway. So those are the different ways that you can time on a Reaper. The stream is all over the place. I'm sorry. I don't know. Do you have any specific questions? Yay! Okay, I call that a win. You're not lost. That's a win for me. Are there anything specifically that you struggle with? Let me see if I can explain something that you actually personally have a problem understanding. Oh, I don't think I ever explained anything about reverbs and delays, did I? No, I didn't. I do need to mention that part. Yeah, I didn't. Okay. So, remember I did have this little thing that said the 6 core aspects of mixing. And I have reverb and delays in this category that's like most subjective aspects. The reason I put that there is because they really depend on based off of the song you're singing, based off of the vocals, based off of how you want the messaging to come across, what kind of impression you want to give. Do you want it to be very immersive? Do you want it to be very like roomy? Do you want it to be quiet? Do you want it to be not noticeable? Those ones really just take a lot of judgment based off of what you want to convey in your mix. But one interesting thing about reverbs and delay is they're kind of the same thing. Reverbs are just delays that kind of get more dispersed the more time goes on. So a delay is more like it's repeating the vocal that you fed into it, but it will clearly repeat that one until you deem you want it to stop. Reverbs are delays because you're hearing that echo and it's being repeated, but then because of the environment or the fake environment that you're feeding into it, it's becoming more muffled and unclear as time goes, and it kind of spreads out. But really, reverb is a type of delay. That's why on some delay plugins, you'll see that under the presets, they have reverbs. Sorry. One thing about presets. Presets are very, very helpful. Very, very useful. I, unfortunately, do not think to use presets. I have a very few amounts of presets that I've personally made. A lot of it is from judgment and intuition of having mixed prior things. A lot of the changes and tweaks I make, I don't save a whole lot of my presets. I probably should. It probably would make my workflow faster. I do not, though. I just don't genuinely think to use them. You can get a ton of different free, really good presets. Let me clear my filter. The one that I mainly use for delay would be Valhalla Supermassive. It's free. You can find it on Plugin Boutique. It's pretty good, honestly. The only thing is I don't tend to put them directly on my vocals. So what happens is I typically will I'll make myself a new track. Let's make myself a new empty track. And it'll be separate. And what I do is, this is called mix busing. So I'll take this little button. It says root. If you hold click and move it to the other track, you get this thing that says controls for track, whatever. And you see this little thing. So this is called a send. That means I'm sending this vocal's information to this track, but any changes I make on this track won't affect the original vocals that I already have set up. It's really useful for if you want to make a lot of adjustments to your effects, but you don't want to actually affect the vocal itself. So, for example, I'll put Valhalla Supermassive on there. And what I would do is I tell this thing, hey, I want you to send this information to here, but I don't want it to actually like be heard. Because if I play right now, ignore that. It's just super loud, right? So what I would do is you go to audio, new channels, 3, 4. And within this track, it's having 2 different paths. The information on one path, but it won't be able to be heard. And your new plugins that you do want to be heard on the new track. And then you go to the first plugin on that track and you say, you go to this button here and you say that you want the information, the input, to be from the new track that you sent the information to, and you want it to affect what's coming out of the track that you can actually hear. So now you hear the effect, but it's your vocal is untouched, and it's not super loud because it's not basically doubled. It's fun. I highly recommend looking more into it. I'm probably not explaining it with justice. The term is called mix busing, and you could do it in pretty much any DAW, I think. Maybe not Audacity, but I have not tried it in Audacity. So that is a thing to keep in mind. I think I want to show right now. I want to show the personal mix that I was mentioning earlier. Let me just real quick. So right now it's on my Reaper specifically. Because I want to load. I would usually use a different method of loading up this file, but I don't want like my other commissions to like basically be like shown on screen, because I don't know if I don't have any okays to show anything, hence why I'm showing my own mix. But this is an example of what my mixes look like, and I feel fine showing you guys what my own looks like. Why is it playing a sound? Oh, okay, it's one of my effects. I know what effect it is though. For now, I'm gonna mute that one because it's been causing me problems. So, sorry. That was way too loud. Please don't do this to me. You're embarrassing me. I'm kidding, it's fine. I embarrass myself all the time. This is what my mix files look like. So I have my the original song ripped off of YouTube, low-key. For reference, up here, I have my instrumental, and other people probably have a much nicer way of organizing it. Mine is a mess. I'm very sorry. If I'm mixing for myself, I don't tend to be organized. Even if I'm mixing in front of others, actually, I'm not very organized. I'm just generally not very organized with this stuff. Yeah. But as you can see, I have quite a lot of tracks and files and all the such automation. I have my key written up here, so I know that right here there's a key change. That's the new key. You know how with art it's like you hear artists label your layers. This is the same thing. You should be labeling your layers, and you probably should like have colors so that way you could distinguish things. I have some colors so that way I could distinguish certain files, but aside from that, it's atrocious. Okay. So I have my main folder, my main vocal bus, which is all my vocals with their effects in that. And then I can send this to my FX bus, which houses all my different effects that I used on the song. I used some effects directly on my vocals, but for the most part, I sent a lot of them out. So then right here, I have slapback delay. What do I have on this? I have reverb. I have more reverb with other effects, like a de-esser to make it so that way my S sounds aren't as noticeable in the reverb, because sometimes that can be a bit loud. I have a plugin called Fresh Air on there to make it sound a little bit more airy. I have more reverb. This one specifically for the ad-libs. And this one's like a super echoey one. I have echoey delay. What do I have on this? Oh, okay. I used this one. This one's also another reverb. I have a lot of reverbs on this. Why do I have so many reverbs? But I know why. But like, why? Past me. I made choices. Yeah, okay. They're not all being sent. So I have my main vocals being sent to 3 specific ones, but then I wanted to give a little bit more oomph to certain lines. So I made them their own reverb channel and gave them a different one. This one is a technique called parallel compression. And it's basically to also add more emphasis to make your vocals thicker and to emphasize certain frequencies. And it has, like, this one has its own EQ doing one thing on it. And then I also have this program called Wider, which makes it like, it takes your vocals and makes it more wrapped around your ears, so that way you feel like you're in an environment and more of an echoey room. I like this plugin. It's also free. Highly recommend you go and look for it. It's very good. So then I have, within my vocals bus folder, I have many vocals. This one is all ad-libs. In this song, there's some shouts, there's some haze, there's some counting. So I have them all in their own little folder, the parentheses folder. I have more ad-libs that are like more for adding movement and for setting environment and tone. They're basically just oohs and ahs. They don't have a whole lot of EQ. They don't have a whole lot of compression. And they're all panned to different like numbers, like to be around your ear. I'll play this afterwards when I'm done explaining. But I have like 4 tracks of ad-libs for that. And that's the ad-lib folder. I have okay. I have my harmonies folder, a high harmony, and low harmonies. When you're recording lines, it's always good to record any tracks that overlap on separate tracks. So if you're singing one line and you know that you're going to spill over into the next line, or maybe it does it in the song and you're trying to mimic that, but if you feel like there's any chance any lines are going to like go over each other, record them on separate tracks, because then you can't undo the fact that they were overlapping once it's been rendered. And making cuts and adjustments will be really, really hard. So just put them on separate tracks. But that's my harmonies folder. I have a low octave that I recorded, which is just the main melody, but in a lower octave. And then I have my main melody. But as you can see, each track has like so many things on it. I start with, and this is that I rendered out other previous versions of this song. Like, before this, I had other folders, like other project files that were dedicated solely to timing and solely to tuning. That's my personal preference for mixing. Is I do all my timing on one project file, I render it out, or I glue everything and I make sure that like it's all rendered and all that stuff. and then I make a new file and start with tuning. And I tune those rendered out files. Then once I'm satisfied with that, I render it out and put it into a new file and mix. And that's where I put a lot of my other ones, because a lot of the mixing centric plugins, or at least the ones that I'm using, are really CPU intensive. So I just like to put it on something else so I'm assured like I'm not going to have problems. But as you can see, I have a lot of things on it. I have, let me go back to my display capture so you can see my arrow. I have M auto volume. I have this. So M auto volume is a volume automator. It makes all your vocals volumes even before compression. Compression will squash your vocals, but this one doesn't squash your vocals. More so, it just turns up, it literally turns up the volume and turns down the volume. Compression actually squishes the vocals a little bit, so that way everything is more compact, and that way you interpret it as louder. They're a little bit different. This actually makes compression's job a little bit easier. But as you can see, I have it on like every file. I bet you can find other people with a much simpler mixing process. I have a D-reverb, so I don't have like a super clean sounding area, as you can tell by my room reverb as I'm talking to you. Hello. I don't have very dry vocals sometimes. I will record with a blanket over my head, but that can only do so much. So you can put a D-reverb to take out some of that transient sound, some of that echo a little bit. I have de-esser to turn down my sounds so they're just not as noticeable. When I was younger, I had a lisp. I'm a little bit self-conscious about that, not gonna lie. I don't like when my S sounds are too noticeable. And now I'm paying attention to my S sounds. Thanks, me. But as you can see, I have an EQ. Oopsies. I didn't mean to do that. Did I make any? Okay, no, I didn't make any egregious changes. Okay. I have an EQ here. And then I also have 2 compressors following it, and then another EQ. I know. You wouldn't have noticed. Now you noticed. And now I noticed. And fun. It's kind of like when you don't think about breathing, but then you do, and then you realize that you're aware of your breathing now. You're welcome. But, so I have these effects. These ones are in another folder called Main Melody. Main Melody also has effects on it. It has another exciter. It has more compression. It has a multiband compression, which is basically like a dynamic EQ. It compresses certain frequency ranges, but it just does it with a bit bigger ranges. I have another EQ. I think that one's actually like a bypassed one. So depending on where I am in the song, it's on or it's off. Yeah, it is. And same thing with the bit reduction. I have an imager, so it makes certain parts of the song wider. Oh. I might have to cut the stream short. I might have to go. Yeah, I have to go. I hope to do another one of these later on. Because maybe with more, like, planning. I meant to plan this one out a little more, but then I realized that I had an assignment due, and I kind of wasn't able to plan this out as much as I'd like. So I would like to do another one of these later on. I guess keep on the lookout for that. I didn't get to everything I wanted to do. I was unorganized. I'll watch this later and like make notes for myself of how I can improve it later. But for now, I think I might have to end the stream. I didn't make it to 3, but I did have a very, very fun time. Thank you for joining me and my chaotic, unorganized thoughts about mixing. I hope to have something better another time. Have a good day.